Today's episode is going to be very interesting because I talk about the JFK assassination. And this is a very broad topic, which is what this whole episode is going to be about. Was Oswald the killer that was alone that killed JFK, or were there some conspirators involved? We investigate this episode right now. So, John F. Kennedy, he was the 35th President of the United States from 1961 until his assassination in 1963. And he was one of the youngest presidents ever to be in office, considering the fact he was in his 40s. Now, on that fateful day of when he was shot, he was killed by Oswald, and this changed the United States domestically, and people believe that Oswald was the only individual involved, but was he? So as we investigate this history, it goes to 12:30 p.m. that day, and Kennedy's intention was to ease tensions between different members of the Democratic Party, which is why he was in the motorcade in the first place. Now, of course, he was shot once in the back and once in the head. Now, Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital and he was declared dead by 1 p.m. at just 46 years old. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald, he was arrested for killing a police officer, J.D. Tippit, along with the killing of John F. Kennedy. And Oswald denied shooting anyone, saying that he was set up and that he was just a patsy. And it wasn't until 2 days later Jack Ruby shot and killed Oswald. Now, if you look in the Zapruder film, which was published in 1963, but it wasn't until 1975 to where people in the United States could view the film, it showed Kennedy's head jerking backward, making people think that there was another shooter that was in front of him. And this led to the House of Selective Committee on Assassinations, also short for HSCA, to investigate this case further. Now, these people agreed that the original investigation found a recording suggesting that 4 shots were fired. Now this was involving the possibility that there was a second shooter involved. However, they couldn't prove exactly who it was. Now, this rose a lot of suspicion a little bit over 30 years later, because in 1991 there was a movie called JFK that was released, which stirred up the conspiracy theories, and Kevin Costner plays a good Jim Garrison. And I will talk to you in a little bit in this podcast who Jim Garrison was. But in the meantime, after the movie was released, it led the President of John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 to be passed, and this allowed the release of many secret documents regarding the assassination. And so they did, and it wasn't until they grabbed deeper, and this was one of them. This was called the Umbrella Man in the case. Now, in the Zapruder film and also in the photos, you see that there is a man wearing a dark suit, or whatever clothes he's wearing, with a black umbrella. Now, it was very hot that day, and this rose suspicion, because why in the hell would somebody be dressed like this, holding an umbrella? Now, this figure appears in several films in this case, and he was one of the closest bystanders when the president was first struck by this bullet near the Stevens Freeway sign within the Dealey Plaza. Now, considering the fact that it was very clear, that's when they started trying to find this gentleman, and they started networking, and it wasn't until the man came forth and he released his name as Louis Stephen Witt, and he came forward to the United States of the HSCA in 1978, and he identified himself as the Umbrella Man. Now, they asked him why he did this, and they basically said that his goal in moving the umbrella was the fact that it was his way of heckling his father, Joseph P. Kennedy, in the support of Neville Chamberlain. Now, of course, the way he did this was he took the umbrella and he actually opened up opened up and closed the umbrella, and he swung it counterclockwise as President Kennedy was actually driving past him with his motorcade. Now, they believe that the goal of this whole him closing and moving the umbrella clockwise was him, whoever he was undercovering as, to throw the second or third shot at President Kennedy. Now, this is what people believe. Now, of course, after the assassination had happened, as you look in this picture, there were 2 gentlemen that are sitting right next on the sidewalk while people are panicking and actually reacting to this, and they're taken undercover. Now, As you see this, right, you have next to this man, the dark complected man. Now, before getting up and walking towards the Texas School Book Depository, right, the fact that both men sat there so calmly after the shooting raised suspicion. Now, the early speculation came from assassination researchers Josiah Thompson and Richard Sprague, who noticed the open umbrella in a series of photographs. Now, Thompson and Sprague suggested that the umbrella man may have been acting as a signaler of some kind. Now, opening his umbrella to signal "go ahead" as a fire to fire the second round. Now, there's been another theory that and this was endorsed by Robert B. Cutler. Now, they believe that the umbrella may have been used as a fire dart to paralyze John F. Kennedy to prevent him from ducking into the motorcade. And this was to immobilize his muscles and make him a sitting duck for the assassination. Now, journalist Penn Jones Jr. was approached by someone who mentioned by the name of Louis Stephen Witt. Now, when he was tracked down, he barely wanted to interact with journalists, but offered to testify before the HCA, and this is where he identified himself and all that. So after that, we also have the Badgeman. Now, this refers to a figure spotted in the photograph taken by Mary Moorman. Now, she was a witness in the Dealey Plaza on November 22nd of that day, and she was standing on the grass north of Elm Street, close to the presidential motorcade's route, while she snapped a photograph just as the shots rang out. In Moorman's photograph, conspiracy theorists claim that a man can be seen standing behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll, and this figure appears to be dressed in uniform, and he might have a badge on his chest, hence the name Badgeman. Now, he is reported to be holding a rifle taken at aim, and this challenges the official account presented by the Warren Commission, because this concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald, now the Warren Commission, of course, was involving the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and he was the one that fired those shots only. But however, let's break down the specifics of the photograph and the argument surrounding it. Now, Mary Moorman's photo was taken with a Polaroid camera, capturing an image in black and white, and in the background of the photo, behind the motorcade and the crowd, you can see the grassy knoll area with its picket fence and the retaining wall. And supporters of the Badgeman theory believe that they can identify a figure in this area who appears to be wearing a police or military-style uniform. And now the figure's supposed badge is what led the name Badgeman. So this figure can be seen in the shooting stance, suggesting that he is firing a weapon at the moment Kennedy was struck. Now, one of the main supports of this theory was Richard E. Sprague, on the assassination researcher, who, along other analysts, they were able to enchant and study Moorman's photography extensively. So they argued that the figure was not only present, but actively participating in the assassination firing at the president from the grassy knoll, a position that would provide a clear shot at the motorcade. Now, supporters of the Badgeman theory often point on the direction in which Kennedy's head moved after the fatal shot. Now, on the Zapruder film, there's another crucial piece of evidence that shows Kennedy's head jerking backward and to the left, which some interpret as evidence of a shot from the front right, consistent with the grassy knoll position. So furthermore, there's been some eyewitnesses in the Dealey Plaza who reported hearing gunshots from the direction of the grassy knoll and seeing smoke or movement there. And these accounts supported the idea that there was more than one shooter. Now, critics of the Badgeman theory, they argue that the image is too blurry or indistinct to draw any definitive conclusions, but they suggest that what looks like to be a figure could be a play of light and shadows combined with the grainy quality of the photograph. Now, skeptics also point out that extensive investigations, including those by the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, did not find evidence of a second shooter. But the HSCA did, however, conclude in 1979 that there was a high probability that a second gunman was involved, based on the evidence from a police motorcade radio. And this evidence indicated that 4 shots were fired, not 3, suggesting the presence of a second shooter. However, the reliability of this evidence has been widely debated and criticized. So, the Badgeman photo ties into conspiracy theories. Some theories speculate that the second shooter could have been part of a larger conspiracy involving the CIA, anti-Castro Cuban exiles, the mafia, or even the rogue elements of the U.S. government. Now, these theories, they they're able to provide various motives for the assassination, ranging from revenge and political power struggles to involving Kennedy's policies that he had on Cuba and Vietnam. Now, despite the lack of proof that the Badgeman remains a well-known figure to the assassination of JFK, it's just a mystery, right? However, the Badgeman, of course, is able to be dramatized in this movie JFK, bringing the wider audience and fueling into ongoing speculation that these people were involved in the killing. Now, the another figure that was involved with this story was Jim Garrison. Now, Jim Garrison was the district attorney of Orleans Parish, Louisiana, from 1962 to 1973, and he's best known for the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy, which he launched in the late 1960s. And Garrison's investigation was the only one to ever result in a trial related to Kennedy's murder. Now, he was a very brave guy because he told it like it was, because not a lot of people at that time could understand or be brave to say to the media that the JFK assassination was possibly a conspiracy from our government and not just Oswald. Now, Garrison's interest in the Kennedy assassination was sparked by the lack of evidence he saw in the Warren Commission report, which, of course, again concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald that Oswald acted alone in the killing of Kennedy. But this is where Garrison became very skeptical, because in 1967 he charged New Orleans businessman Clay Shaw with the conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy, and he claimed that Shaw, along with other individuals, including David Ferrie and Guy Bannister, were part of a plot to kill Kennedy. Now, let's dive deeper into Jim Garrison's investigation. Now, of course, we all know Clay Shaw, and now we have a guy by the name of David Ferrie. And David Ferrie was also known as the Guy Bannister. Now, he was linked to Shaw. Now, he was linked to Shaw Garrison was able to link Shaw to Ferrie. And now, David was a former airline pilot with the CIA connections in Bannister, and he was a former FBI agent. But Garrison suggested that these men were involved in a plot to kill Kennedy. Now, he believed that Ferrie played a significant role in planning and executing the plan. Now, there's also another guy by the name of Carlos Marcello, which he also tried to get involved in charging. And he was a mob boss, and he might have been involved. And Garrison suggested that the mafia had a motive to kill Kennedy due to his administration's crackdown on organized crime. There was also the CIA involvement with this guy. Now, of course, one of the most controversial aspects of Garrison's investigation was his certainty that the CIA was involved in Kennedy's assassination, and he argued that elements within this agency did not like Kennedy's policies on Cuba and the Cold War, and they were involving to kill him. Now, Garrison's investigations with these people and also the CIA, it met with significant criticism and controversy. So let's investigate this. The problem with this is there's lack of concrete evidence, and there's critics that argue that Garrison's case was based on the lack of evidence and the speculative connections rather than hard proof. And they pointed out that much of his evidence was not proof, and that they lacked direct links of the assassination. There's also reliances on, of course, witnesses that aren't accurate, right? Because, for instance, Perry Russo, who is often seen as unreliable, Russo initially told a different story about his knowledge of the conspiracy, at different times, and only later, under hypnosis, after being coached by Garrison's team, did he provide testimony that supported Garrison's case. Now, there was also accusations of misconduct. They accused Garrison as using forcible tactics and manipulation to obtain testimony and to manipulate witnesses. And it was alleged that he pressured witnesses into supporting his theories, raising questions about the integrity of this investigation. Now, the media criticisms about this from Garrison, they said that Garrison faced harsh criticism from the media, particularly from major outlets like Life magazine and NBC. But they accused him of conducting a reckless investigation and using the assassination story for notoriety, and this media scrutiny contributed to public skepticism about his findings. Now, there is also legal and political pressure involved. Now, Garrison also faced opposition from within the legal political establishment, and many officials, including members of the federal government and law enforcement, viewed his investigation as a threat to the official narrative and being able to sought to undermine its efforts. Now, despite the criticism, Garrison persisted on his investigations, which led to the trial of Clay Shaw in 1969, and the trial ended with Shaw's innocence. Now, the jury listened for less than an hour before Shaw was found not guilty, and the verdict was a significant blow to Garrison's case and credibility. Now, Garrison's investigations status on this case, while it was controversial, it did have some lasting impacts, right? Despite the fact that he was criticized for thinking that the JFK assassination was a conspiracy. Now there's public awareness and skepticism regarding this because Garrison's efforts have brought significant public attention to the unanswered questions in the Warren Commission's report. Now, his investigation, it helped to foster a broader sense of skepticism about the official report of this assassination, and there was an influence on popular culture. Now, Garrison's work was later dramatized again in this movie, and you can watch it. Kevin Costner plays a good Jim Garrison, for he demands the documents released of John F. Kennedy. Now, of course, it just allowed a lot of legislative changes regarding the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act, which mandated the release, again, documents related to the assassination, which was withheld from the public for many years. Now, there's also mysterious deaths which are contributed into this case, because beyond tragedy of that day, there was a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances that haunted the narrative of this. Now, let's begin with one of the most propelling figures, and that was Dorothy Kilgallen. Now, Dorothy Kilgallen, she was a prominent journalist and television personality known for her sharp wit and investigative prowess. Now, she was not one to shy away from controversial topics, but Kilgallen conducted a private interview with Jack Ruby, who was a former nightclub owner who shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, she was the only journalist to have such access to Ruby, and she was reportedly working on an explosive expose that could reveal new details about the assassination. Now, Kilgallen, was determined to get to the bottom of it, and she was able to tell friends what she discovered something big, something that could shake the very foundation of the official story. Now, of course, tragically, Dorothy Kilgallen, she was found dead on November 8th, 1965, and the cause was ruled as an overdose of barbiturates and alcohol, but many have questioned this conclusion. Given her investigation into the JFK assassination, her death was just very suspicious. Now, this wasn't until another witness would also mysteriously disappear, and this was by the name of Rose Cherami. Now, just days before John F. Kennedy, before he was assassinated, Rose was found injured on a Louisiana highway. And while she was recovering, she made a prediction that as she was making this prediction, she was frantic, saying that President Kennedy was going to be killed in Dallas in a couple days. Now, the medical staff thought she was just another delusional patient, and Rose Cherami claimed to have overheard two men discussing the assassination plot. So, she was dismissed from the time, but after Kennedy's death, her story gained credibility, while in 1965, she died in a hit-and-run accident, which many believe was no accident at all. And Officer Francis Fruge, who had encountered Rose, believed that she knew something and was silenced for it. Now, again, we turn to David Ferrie, like we talked about earlier. And again, they tied him to the Lee Harvey Oswald, right? That he was involved in the conspiracy. And now, again, Jim Garrison thought David Ferrie was one of the key models of being part of this, and he was the one that planned it and executed it. Now, it wasn't until February 22nd, 1967, David Ferrie was found dead in his apartment just days before he was scheduled to testify. Now, his death was officially attributed to a cerebral hemorrhage, but the circumstances raised many eyebrows. And now, Ferrie was scared. It was reported. Ferrie was so scared, and he had he was very paranoid that people would kill him, and he was very scared to like give information about this case. And he was telling people over and over again, I can't release a lot of information because something's going to happen to me. Something's going to happen to me. But however, he grabbed whatever talk that Jim Garrison had in his team, he was able to convince David Ferrie to testify in court. Now, when he died, it didn't feel like people that saw he died, they felt like it wasn't an accident. There was somebody that actually killed him, and that was people that were silencing. But again, we're going into these cases where people that knew about the assassination, they're mysteriously dying. Why? Which is very strange. Why are these people that were involved in the assassination just die? This doesn't make any sense. Now, there was another guy by the name of George D. Morin, he was a geologist and acquaintance of Lee Harvey Oswald, and he had a mysterious end. Now, he was scheduled to testify before the House of Select Committee on the assassinations, but he was found dead from a gunshot wound on March 29, 1977. And his death was ruled a suicide, but the timing was the timing was just very weird, that he was getting ready to testify in court a couple days. But they did notice that George was very nervous and that he felt the walls closing on him because he was just very nervous that something was going to happen to him, and sure enough, something did happen to him. Now, there was another guy, of course, by the name of Gary Underhill, who was a former CIA agent. He was another individual who voiced suspicions about this involvement with the assassination, but he was found dead in May of 1964 from a gunshot wound, which was ruled as a suicide. Now, Underhill was terrified and claimed to be, he was known as giving very factual and big information about this. But people that knew him thought it was just very weird that he died a couple days before he was testifying. Now, there was another guy by the name of Johnny Roselli. Now, he was a mobster with ties to both the CIA and the organized crime. He was implicated in plots against Fidel Castro, with some believe involved the intersection of this JFK assassination. However, it was in 1976 that his body was found stuffed in a 55-gallon drum floating in Biscayne Bay, Florida. Wow. And it was said that he had a lot of enemies, but his death was just very brutal, to where it involved the silence of him bringing up factual evidence about the case. Now, we also look at William Sullivan, who was a top FBI official during the time of John F. Kennedy's assassination. Now, Sullivan was also preparing to testify before the HSCA, but however, he was accidentally shot and killed by a hunter in 1977. Doesn't make any sense. So you got all these people that are dying, that are testifying against the JFK assassination as witnesses that it was a conspiracy, but they're mysteriously dying. Now, these are key people that are forming actual secrets that are coming forth about this case. Now, the mysterious deaths and disappearances of these individuals, they form a dark and unsettling backdrop to this assassination of JFK. Now, their stories, they add depth to web theories and suspicions that surround that fateful day in Dallas. But the question is, knowing about Jim Garrison, who was a polarizing figure in the history of the JFK assassination, his investigation was facing significant criticisms, but it didn't result in any conviction, and it played a crucial role in challenging the official narrative and keeping the debate about Kennedy's assassination alive. Now, Garrison is a testament of a lot of mysteries with these conspiracies, and between the evidence that happened in Dallas versus the people that mysteriously disappeared and died that knew JFK very closely, one thing can be said about this, was that the majority of Americans believe that following the deaths of RFK and Martin Luther King Jr., that it was a government conspiracy, because after this assassination, it was just a lot of shootings during that decade. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and make sure you subscribe to this channel and comment and tell me what you think. Do you believe that this was a conspiracy or an act of Oswald alone? You decide. Alright, guys.
Please like and subscribe to this